Protect your DNA. BioPQQ can promote formation of new mitochondria. Infowarsstore.com.
Today, President Trump signed executive orders that are going to change things at the EPA. Yeah, there's climate change going on, and it's at the EPA. It's not global, folks, but it's changing. The climate is changing in D.C. As USA Today puts it, energy independence and not climate change become the priority under President Trump's order. This executive order, they said, is a sweeping repudiation, let's hope so, of Obama-era environmental initiatives, substituting a strategy of combating climate change through international cooperation. That was Obama's approach. Let's do international cooperation. No, what he was talking about was creating a new world government, a governing body that was going to control our economies. So they're substituting for that an America First energy policy. Trump said this is the start of a new era of American energy production that would restore economic freedom and allow our workers to thrive and compete and succeed on a level playing field for the first time in a long time. He spoke at a signing ceremony at the EPA today on stage with a dozen coal miners. Why coal miners? Well, as we all know, they were the ones that Obama and Hillary had targeted for extinction. So that's the problem with the EPA. The EPA left its mission of clean water, clean air, and they had to grow their empire, their bureaucracy. So they brought in climate change, and they have stepped over the line in so many different areas. It's one of the things that we were all very excited about, with Pruitt being selected as the man to run the EPA. As Attorney General in Oklahoma, he had fought the unlawful actions of the EPA as much, if not more so, than any other Attorney General. And so hopefully we're going to see these policies rolled back, but there are still some questions. We'll get to those in just one moment. They say under Obama, federal agencies were required to plan for the effects of climate change and treat it as a national security issue. Well, you know, quite frankly, it is. Quite frankly, our economy is a national security issue. And if you're going to shut down the economy over unicorn farts, then that is a national security issue. And understand that as they subsidized the solar power industry, and again, solar power can be very effective in an off-the-grid situation, but they don't want it in an off-the-grid situation. They want it in a grid situation, which creates massive issues of storage to smooth out the ups and downs of power supply. And so because they want to keep control, because they want to have a centralized grid, solar power doesn't work even with their massive subsidies. None of these renewables do work on that kind of a basis. But they're going to shut things down anyway. And they made a move in the face of Fukushima, as Fukushima was creating all these problems that it still, to this day, is creating. Remember all the robots that have gone in and been killed by the radiation. What is it doing to the environment? Well, the environmentalists don't care. They're not concerned about nuclear energy. They're not concerned about the storage of spent nuclear reactors or the fuel rods. They're only concerned about carbon dioxide. Also at the ceremony was Vice President Pence, along with Secretary of Energy Rick Perry and Interior Secretary and the EPA Administrator. They said Pence, the war on coal is over. And of course, that was the war that was pronounced by both Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama. But listen to this quote from Al Gore. He says, "A misguided step away from a sustainable, carbon-free future for ourselves and our generations to come." He said that's what this is, a misguided step away from a carbon-free future. Well, listen, idiot, if you have a carbon-free future, all the plants and animals will die. Carbon dioxide is what plants need to exist. We don't want a carbon-free future for the scientifically illiterate out there. James Dellenpole pointed this out last week, that Al Gore is going around selling his new movie saying that Brexit was a product of climate change. What is the perverted logic line here that he's got? Well, Al Gore believes that the problems that are going on in Syria were a result of a drought, which he thinks was caused by climate change. It wasn't simply a drought, and it had absolutely nothing to do with Obama and Hillary's policy of setting the Middle East on fire, first in Libya, then in Syria, using al-Qaeda, using ISIS as surrogates. Had nothing to do with any of that. It had nothing to do with the globalist plan to open our borders and to have mass immigration in an uncontrollable, unsustainable way into the Western economies. No, it had nothing to do with any of that. It was simply about a drought in Syria that was a result of climate change, and that caused people to react with Brexit. Now let's take a look at some of the details here, this executive order. As Politico is saying, and this is saying something from Politico, they're very concerned about this, and that's a good thing because Politico is not on our side. They said this is the biggest blow yet to former Obama's climate legacy. But it does not go, they say, as far as some conservatives would like to dismantle the EPA's authority to regulate greenhouse gases. and this is important, nor will it begin to separate the U.S. from a landmark international climate accord. Okay, now this is the devil in the details here, folks. What is that climate accord they're talking about? Well, that's the Paris Climate Change Treaty that we signed onto, that they signed us onto. They didn't get it ratified exactly, but they just said, well, we're going to have the Secretary of State sign it, the President sign it, and that's enough. So that treaty is not really in effect, but the sad thing about this is how this is being opposed within the Trump administration. They say Trump is not expected to tell the EPA to reconsider the underlying policy that lets it regulate carbon emissions, the 2009 endangerment finding, in which it declared that greenhouse gas pollution threatens human health and welfare, nor will he address the 2015 Paris Climate Accord. Now, understand what this means. As they're talking about this and saying these executive orders are going to be taken to court, and they're saying, well, you know, we're not going to take this that far. We're not going to challenge the endangerment finding, because if we did that, it would turn into a large legal battle. It will be a large legal battle because of the endangerment finding if you don't attack the foundations of what Obama has built. This is what's true of Obamacare as well. If you don't attack the foundations, the structures that he's set up, your efforts to modify this around the edges will not hold. I don't think that this executive order is going to hold if they're not willing to fight the endangerment finding. If they can't fight the fundamental statement that was made by the EPA and Obama that this endangers human life, then the courts are not going to side with them. They say, well, you can't fight this in the courts because you're going to have to fight the scientific consensus. Well, that has been fought, and that has been defeated. We had Lord Monckton defeat Al Gore in Britain against a hostile judge. He said that inconvenient truth was a convenient lie, and he proved it in court. And yet that hostile judge, who really said, okay, you win, but we're not going to give you anything. It was essentially a Pyrrhic victory. They said he can still show this propaganda film to school children, but we'll accompany it with some kind of a legal disclaimer document, which you know they're not going to read, nor will their parents. So to that degree, it was a Pyrrhic victory, but we know that science is not on their side. Science is not won by consensus. It is won by facts. And so we can argue this fact, but if you leave that in place, and if you leave the Paris Climate Accord in place, that is going to undermine all of this. We're not going to have any real substantive change. And that's the true issue. Where is that opposition coming from? Well, the reports are that it's coming from Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump. They want to remain in the Paris Climate Change Treaty, which I frankly do not understand. And this is the way it was summed up by James Delingpole, the guy who just pointed out that Al Gore is telling the world that climate change created Brexit. Delingpole said, what President Trump needs now, more than ever, are administrators with the political will to do the right thing, which is, after all, the reason so many Americans voted for him. He needs to get advisors who share the agenda that he campaigned on. And that's the problem. You know, we look at this, the big tent, and bringing in people who know how to get things done, but they're not on board with the basic fundamental structures that need to be removed. We cannot allow the endangerment clause to stay there, because that will ultimately change. If we can get rid of the Obama Clean Air Act, then what the courts will eventually demand, if the endangerment clause stays there, is that there will be a Trump Clean Air Accord. Okay, so that's what we have to be concerned about. Now, it's also pointed out by the Washington Post. They said, don't worry, all of you leftist environmentalists, because even though they're going to change and may change some of these things at the EPA, we still have removable mandates in 30 states, and they're exactly right. At the state and even sometimes at the city level, just as we're seeing with sanctuary cities, there are prohibitions on using oil and coal and things like that to generate power. And they're saying you must use wind or you must use solar. And as I pointed out, they do not work on a grid system, because we do not have the technology to store the power that varies with wind and with solar. They work very well on an individual basis, and they're a great strategy to get off of the control grid. But they do not give us reliable, affordable power. They're subsidizing these industries, and they are picking the winners and choosers, which is exactly why we don't want to see this happen.
Alex Jones here with a very important news update to anybody out there that wants to be prepared. But it goes beyond being prepared. Our bodies absolutely must have the good halogen iodine, or we will die. And you look at all of the thyroid problems and all the people that don't have energy and that have all sorts of hormone problems. And from my research, and a lot of just mainline research, it leads back to iodine over and over and over again. It's as important as vitamin C. If you don't get iodine, you die. But most people are just deficient, so they're low energy, they're sick. You got to have iodine in your body so that your body can produce the hormones you need. It is the base to so many things. And since I got into iodine 4 years ago, we've helped change the entire paradigm by developing and bringing to the public deep earth crystals from 7,000 to 12,000 feet of the purest iodine available. Other iodine comes from the ocean or from other byproducts of chemical facilities and is tainted. It's bound. It's not absorbable. I tried it. And I had incredible effects even with dirty iodine because the body needs it. When you don't have iodine, it absorbs the chlorine, the fluoride, and all these other bad halogens. Do yourself and your family a favor and check out the importance of iodine for yourself. I think you're going to be blown away. And whatever you do, support the broadcast and get a bottle of Survival Shield Nascent Iodine X2. Also consult your physician because if you've been deficient in it or have other issues, it can have some dramatic effects. As for me and most folks I talk to, it's been a game changer in the positive column, but still consult your physician because iodine is no joke. It's a key building block of the body. And if you haven't had it for a long time and suddenly have it, some folks say they've experienced things like a detoxing effect and things like that. You've got to have vitamin C. You've got to have iodine to live. You've got to have water to live. Iodine is key. You must have it, but consult your physician first before you get powerful Survival Shield Nascent Iodine X2 at InfoWarsLife.com or call toll free. We can answer your questions, 888-253-3139.